Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our program on media in Burma. I'm Joan Mower, and I'm the Acting Director of Business Development at the U.S. Agency for Global Media. We, of course, oversee Voice of America and Radio Free Asia, and luckily we will have representatives from both organizations with us today. The U.S. Agency for Global Media's Employee Association, USAGM Employees Association, is it's a fantastic volunteer organization set up, run by employees on a volunteer basis. And we support journalists around the world who work for us who find themselves in tough times. Unfortunately, given the climate worldwide and attacks on journalists, we've had a lot of work to do. And a lot of support to give to our often people who are stringers in countries abroad who do such important work delivering news and information to the world and to us. So with that, I'd like to move on to our topic of discussion today, which is media in Burma. I won't go into the details because our panelists are going to do that. We have two experts on media in Burma. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the coup has meant, the coup in February of 2021 has meant to the journalism world, which is unfortunately not a good one. But I think it's a subject that people really should know about and care about. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lwin, who is the VOA Burmese Service Chief. He's has an international reputation. He's been with us for a number of years, but he came to us from Burma, where he was an established journalist there. And with that, I'm going to have him talk a little bit about, set the scene for us about what happened in February and before and after, and what the political situation on the ground is right now in Burma. Over to you, Lwin.
Hi, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone who joined this meeting. So thank you very much for your very kind introduction, Joan. I like to start out with that just to give you the taste of how, what I call, severe is the situation, and also the magnitude of the situation, severity of the situation on the ground. So just today, even United Nations human rights expert, we're talking about Burma situation, and Burma is very much comparable now. The situation like what happened in Syria and Libya, like where Assad killed its own people, or Muammar Gaddafi's killed its own civilians, during this kind of unrest. So also that Myanmar military is now bombarding using the fighter jet to what I call destroy the rebels group who were kind of supporting that street protester who taking shelter with them. So the situation is really, really bad. So number of people killed on the ground on the street is more than 700 as of today within the days, 70 days, and also more than 3,500 people are known to have been arrested. And then the court martial or martial, because of the martial law announced, there's a lot of people has been sentenced to death. So there's a situation is very bad. So that's why people on the ground, or United Nations, there has been at least 2 closed-door Security Council meetings called, and then there's been a lot of call about announcing the no-fly zone to protect civilians over there or something like that. A lot of actions, but these what I call international action has been hampered by that China and Russia, who decided now, obviously, with the military junta in Burma, and then preventing any kind of intervention or what I call UN right to protect actions against the military. This is a kind of a brief of the ground situations or brief of the international response. But these all things happen after the first February military takeover. Military has been, actually, Burma has been under military rule for a long time ago, since I was born. And then since the 1962, there's been a military takeover, and Burma has been isolated by itself by the name of the term socialist regime, like the Cuba style socialist regime. So we've been isolated. There's no English teaching or no foreigners allowed inside there. We are very isolated. But back in 1988, there was a kind of a nationwide movement against the socialist regime, and then but that led to another military takeover, and then we've been under the military rule until the 2015 in that sense. But as a result of the 1988 movement, which I was part of that, I was at the time university students as a protest leader at the time, and after that I fled the country. But as a result of that, of course, that's ended up with the military rule again. But we have an emergence of internationally well-known leader like Aung San Suu Kyi came out and as a leader, and then we've been struggling to get democracy until the 2015. We have a kind of election which National League for Democracy, which was led by Aung San Suu Kyi, won landslide victory. So we have a kind of for past 5 years, we have a kind of semi-democratically elected government led by Aung San Suu Kyi. But it is not fully democratic because of the military role of military inside Burma in the Burmese politics. 25% of that all parliament is being occupied by the military appointed officials. So, and most of those high-ranking or highly profile cabinet positions being occupied by the military. So Aung San Suu Kyi democratic government has been a lot of limitations over the rule of that country and that administrations. But the democratically elected government pledged to change the situation. So after 5 years, there's another kind of free and fair elections we saw in 8 November last year. So in there's another major landslide victory again. So there will be a very certain, the magnitude of winning is very much certain to what I call in future, very near future, to reduce the power of the military in the Burma politics. So military is very, very much happy with that. So since the result of the election in 8 November came out, military has been protesting against that result of that elections and claiming fraud, like fraud in the registration process and other counting, so many things. So before the first February military takeover, there has been a lot of show of force, just to for what I call blackmailing this winning party, just to investigate the fraud or things, and military showing its power by running all those military tank and armored vehicles on the street and show off this their force. So after that, unfortunately, on the 1st February, there's a kind of a military takeover, and Aung San Suu Kyi's and all elected personnel or people were arrested. So after that, there's been people especially very, very much disappointed about that, because they all supported a National League for Democracy and for the change of democratization or democratization for the country. So they all show that they are what I call will, but they are all what I call determinations and expectation being destroyed overnight by the military. So they took to the street. At one point, we can say that about 10 or 20, 15 millions of people on the street. This is a kind of, I must say that biggest street demonstration in the world. So they show off the force. So these things going on, although the military, what I call very brutal crackdowns on the street. And then military is not only killing people on the street, but for that they just introduced the information blackout era again. Internet has been blackout, and also the situation, a lot of journalists has been arrested, and then there's all those what I call communication means of connecting to the outside world is kind of blocked by the military regime. This is a brief of my
Lwin, thank you very much for a really excellent recitation of what's happened. And I think the two things that stick out in my mind from your discussion is the number of people who have been killed and the intensity and the large demonstrations. This is a tinderbox, and unfortunately, we're not getting a lot of information out of Burma. You, of course, do some fantastic work with your reporters, as does Radio Free Asia. And right now, we're going to turn to Rohit Mahajan, if I pronounced that right, Rohit, who is the Vice President for Radio Free Asia, which, along with VOA, is covering incidents inside of Burma. So over to you for the situation with the media, Rohit.
Thanks, Joan, and thanks to everybody who's joined us, and thank you to all the networks that are under the USAGM umbrella who have done incredible work in just about every part of the world, including this one, for people who need journalism. Speaking to what Lwin said in your excellent summary about what is happening and how intense and what a tinderbox situation is, journalists too have been facing immense challenges. I mean, first of all, we saw an immediate blackout for media in the days after February 1st, but the restrictions were not as intense as what they became rapidly. Now we're in a situation where 61 journalists, I think by our count, I spoke with our director yesterday, have been arrested, 30 have been released. But those include journalists with international media such as BBC, AP, the AP, and Deutsche Presseagentur, and at least 5 local media organizations in Burma, which has a thriving ecosystem since things began to open up in 2011, 2012 with DVB, Mizima, Irrawaddy, some of the exile media groups that returned now have been outlawed. So the government is basically now also suing Irrawaddy under charging them with a section of the law that's usually reserved for individual journalists and using all sorts of means to silence basically newspapers and any others. I don't think any newspaper besides government sanctioned ones have printed since March 17th. And the military almost immediately asked for ISPs, the internet service providers, to block Facebook, which is an incredibly important conduit of information in Burma, which is the saying is that sometimes cliche that Facebook is the internet in Burma, with more than half of its population of 55 million being on Facebook. And so I'll speak a little bit to a couple things. I mean, first of all, about the threat and also about connectivity and that how it affects our operations. One is the threat is very real. It's very hazardous to cover events right now. Journalists are not given special protections. Often journalists who are covering events try to somehow blend in, which doesn't seem like a great mode of operation, but they feel that they will be targeted if they identify themselves as journalists. It's hazardous to even talk to the shadow parliament. These are the folks who have been demoted essentially after the coup, after the military uprising. Journalists also, they take great personal safety and their lives in their hands when they do so much as shoot a photograph of a protest. So more and more we see people amongst our staff, and I'm sure with Voice of America, but I know with others at BBC and New York Times that they're relying a lot more on citizen journalists. Because of the pandemic, we've been working from remote for quite some time. So people are used to working from their homes, covering events, not always in person or keeping some distance from that. So there have been some practices in place, but we have over a dozen people who are part of our news gathering operations who are fanning out and taking a lot of precautions. They're not going to the office. They're working from their homes, sometimes not even going to their homes out of fear that they could be targeted somehow, that people can make inquiries about their locations, that they could be on a list and somehow picked up in the dead of night. With the connectivity issue, we've seen telecom and internet blackouts almost immediately, but they've gotten much more severe. There's been at least about 29 days where mobile phones are not able to use data, which means not being able to connect essentially to the internet or Facebook. Broadband routers are not usable for almost 2 weeks. Only access to internet is through fiber optic, like a DSL type of hookup. Public Wi-Fi has been basically barred for 27 days. There's internet outages that even go to those optic cables I mentioned overnight for the last 25 days, I think. And then Joan, I know because of our work together with marketing, PSI satellites are also being confiscated. So we're seeing this like intense blocking of information, of sharing, which is very challenging, of course, to the Burmese people, but also to our journalists in just gathering and bringing it back, all this information back to DC, back to our broadcasts and such. They've had to resort. Our reporters are using more and more like SMS communications, especially with encrypted apps such as Signal, which, as we know, through OTF, the Open Technology Fund, and USAGM's Internet Freedom Program have been made possible. Which early on were a lot of those tools with VPN access and things were incredibly helpful. Now it's kind of questionable with zero internet access how much those things are. So that's an intense challenge for us. Early on, I remember that our reporters were using access to a hotel room where they were able to have no power outages, have internet access to basically have a nonstop flow of information. That's not an option anymore. So it's immensely challenging. But in spite of that, we're still on the ground. We're still trying to do our jobs. And so we feel a great deal of pride about what we do, but we also feel dismay. As Lwin described, the events that have upended Myanmar and its hopes for democracy have also upended the lives of our staff.
Well, thank you, Rohit, for really spelling out exactly some of the challenges that the reporters are facing. I'm going to also make sure that our audience goes to the comments section if they'd like to ask questions. We will absolutely entertain your questions. And I'm going to take the moderator's privilege, and I'm going to go first to Lwin and ask him, Lwin, how are the people in Burma, what do they know about what's going on in Burma? How are they getting their information? Is it all just government propaganda, or what's the situation there?
Yes, the situation is now is information blackout era in Burma. Like all those internet access and mobile internet and social media has been blocked, and also that direct-to-home satellites and those media organizations such as Mizima, Democratic Voice of Burma, all the satellites, they are TV programs, independent TV programs being blocked. So Myanmar government, Myanmar military is now controlling all the medias. Like they've been spreading all those they are what I call propaganda news to Myanmar radio and televisions and Myanmar televisions. So people have only what they have a regular access is this what I call government-run news organization. Apart from that, people sporadically got Facebook news, and then others kind of a lot of mouth to mouth, these word by word spread of the rumors. So the challenge now I like to add is that for the media organization like us is that not only about the gathering news and information from Burma, we also have a sense kind of news and information get into Burma to those people inside, because of there's a no satellite dish available and a no internet available. So we are resorted only to the very conventional what I call method of disseminating news, like shortwave radios and a direct-to-home satellite. And at the same time, we are just now also embracing with that kind of misinformation and disinformation campaign. As you all know that when there's some sort of a war broke out, and the first casualty is the truth. You know that the situation is a lot of misinformation by the government, as well as the rumors spread among the people. So our challenge is really, in that case, intense about check the informations, whether we are getting the real information or truth, and then just simply try to convey our very truth, real information back to Burma. This is the situation. So that one come to your questions and about what Burmese people or Burmese audience in Burma get the information is, in that sense, very worrying, very, very what they call sporadic, and they've been relying on that a lot of informations among the people themselves, a lot of rumors, misinformation among them now. As an international news organization, VOA, Radio Free Asia, and BBC, now they come to the spotlight, and we are the kind of sole source of information to the audience in Burma.
Thank you, Lwin. You actually touched on a question we have from someone in our audience, Doug Boynton, who worked with us and in the past and is very familiar with the Burmese media situation. And I'm going to pitch this to Rohit. Doug is asking Rohit whether journalists themselves are actually able to be objective, and if they can actually cover the situation objectively when they themselves are target, and how you're able to verify their information.
Well, yeah, with great difficulty. This is, we trust our people on the ground to do good work. Right now, often what we're getting from our folks is less in terms of news packages, which they put together a whole segment or something in the past. Now they're giving us snippets of information that we have to put together in DC. We're very cautious about over-involving our reporters on the ground. Like I said earlier about the difficulty in interviewing even people or the contact with people who are controversial, say the shadow parliament or something, figures like that. Now we're having our DC people do those interviews directly, not to endanger, and we're very cautious about using even the voices of our staff. So they are being targeted, but they're exercising extreme caution. Somehow, I mean, they're a younger staff, but like Win talking about Generation 88, I think it's safe to say they've all been there before in some sense. They've all known that this is a fragile state of operation, even prior to this coup, where you had a military that was asserting all sorts of restrictions on the press. I know at numerous times that folks from Radio Free Asia, and I'm sure from Voice of America and others, have been summoned to police headquarters about coverage, reports that we've done about some of the ethnic fighting in the Kachin State and other places throughout the country. So I won't say it's nothing new. I mean, because this is a completely different situation than it was, say, 6 months ago. But at the same time, we've always sort of operated with this extreme sense of caution that things can change very drastically, very quickly.
Thank you, Rohit. I want to pivot to a political question we have for Lwin. It's asked by Ina Dubinsky of the Business Development Office, and she's asking Lwin whether politically, what do you see as happening internally? Are the Burmese people able to have some effect on the military? Where do you see this all going, and what do you see the role of the international community?
I have to answer the last questions and all of the role of international communities. There's a lot of loud voice come out from the role of international community, like that all those Western country, and then also United Nations, and then European Parliament, European Union. But the thing is, and also they introduce or renew a lot of sanctions on Burma, on Burmese military. They blacklist the military-related what I call business and so forth. But the question is whether it is enough to topple that military regime in Burma. And then, to be honest, in that sense, it has been over 70 days, and then the pressures were not enough. Although there's been a lot of numerous killing, more than 700 people be killed people have been killed on the street. So this is a very serious situation. So people, they are very determined in that sense, and they're really, really angry, and then just their hope or their expectations about democratization or of the countries being overturned by the military overnight. So there's a lot of what I call determination by the younger generation called Generation Z in Burma. They have a slight taste of democratization in Burma, and then they are hoping that the country will be even better year by year. But it's all those things being smashed. So they are very determined to actually to what I call take it down that military regime. But in practicalities, I don't know whether it will be actually happen or not, because of the military is an institution, very strong institution. They have weapons. They have actually fully supported by in that sense China, and then also Russia that's provide military hard weapons to the regime. So the politics and geopolitics is actually play really important role for the moment. So of course, domestic and that's people on the street really wants that to have things change, but I don't know how soon it will be, and how effective international communities and then outsider actually help solve the situation right now. The neighboring countries are not that helpful as well, like in Thailand and India. They are not, their policies, they are very muted policies on the situation inside Burma. Also, another important country in Burma is Japan. Japan is also very muted.
If I may, I just...
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Jump in, Rohit.
Yeah, I wanted to also say that, we also are looking to Burma's neighbors as well as how the situation pans out, namely Thailand. And Thailand used to be considered a refuge for people who are leaving countries like Vietnam, Laos, others because of political repression, refugees. Now it's not so clear that that's an asylum place. So the U.S. and other places, I've just, from reports I've been reading, and a lot of publications have been talking a lot about what they're expecting from the ASEAN countries and Burma's neighbors in terms of dealing with the situation, not just direct sanctions and so forth. But of course, this is an issue for not just our journalists, but of course the Burmese people.
Well, on that note, I think we've got a couple of other questions, but I'm going to send them to you privately, and then maybe you can answer them. We set aside half an hour, and this has been a very robust and interesting discussion. I hope people have learned. I certainly have, and will follow this issue closely and support other international organizations along with our own, the Committee to Protect Journalists, Reporters Without Freedom, Reporters Sans Frontières. So Freedom House will be looking to follow Burma, the issue of the people, the country, and particularly the media and our media, which is supported by the USAGM Employees Association. So Lwin and Rohit, I want to thank you for your time. I will note that we have recorded this, and we will post the recording on our Facebook pages and on social media, and maybe inshallah, some of the people inside Burma will get a chance to realize that their plight is very much on our minds, and there is a community in the United States who's very much supportive of them. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their participation, and particularly our tech host, Yemi, who is in the background here. Thank you for a great show, Yemi, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rohit and Joan and Yami.